I get asked a lot of intimate questions. Have you ever faked an orgasm? Are your boobs real? What's the weirdest thing you've done on camera? I think I get asked a lot of intimate questions because I've been involved in a lot of intimate encounters. And when you're naked on the internet, people seem to feel comfortable asking you things that they would never ask their teachers or their parents or their partners. And what I found from these conversations is that people have a lot of questions about pornography, but they rarely receive informed answers. The most frustrating questions I get about pornography are not from individuals, they're from governments. As someone who has worked in both porn and policy, as a researcher of sexual media, I hear the same conversations over and over again. Pornography is violent. Pornography is addictive. Pornography is a public health crisis. And despite all of the inquiries and all the reports, governments have some of the worst porn literacy I've ever encountered. So a politician might say, look at this scene we've found on Pornhub. How do we stop people from seeing this? But what they rarely ask is, how is that scene negotiated? Does that performer have access to justice if they have a bad experience? What can we do to make sure performers have access to collective bargaining power in their workplaces? This sidelining of sex worker experiences is alarming because how can you make sense of what you see if you don't know how it's made? And how can you understand how it's made if you don't ask the people who make it? Porn literacy is a subset of media literacy. It's a skill set for thinking critically about pornography. But the porn literacy programs that get the most airtime just tend to teach people that porn is not real. It promotes unhealthy sexual expectations. It's fantasy. It's entertainment. Don't try it at home. There's often this simplistic distinction between porn sex and real sex, porn stars and real people. But porn performers are portrayed as caricatures and stereotypes. And what these programs really teach is that only heteronormative, monogamous, vanilla kinds of sex are realistic or healthy. This can't be the only thing that we teach people about pornography. What if we taught people that pornography was real? Hear me out. I don't mean let's take porn literally in the sense that we should expect our pizza delivery person is always up for it. I don't mean let's copy this gangbang scene pose for pose without learning the skills to execute it with physical and emotional safety. I mean, let's teach people that there are material realities that shape this industry that people ought to know about. Yes, porn is performative. It's mediated. It also involves real people. We have real sex. We use our real bodies. It's real work. And like most work under capitalism, sometimes it's pleasurable and sometimes it sucks. And the line between what is performative and what is authentic can actually be really blurry. When we just teach people that porn is fake or harmful, we miss a multitude of opportunities to talk about so many critical things. A lack of comprehensive sex education, how porn stigma infiltrates our public conversations, the media monopolies that control what we see, hierarchies of sexual desirability, systems of racial capitalism, the creep of biopolitical surveillance, the ethics of intimate imagery. These are the conversations we must be having if we want a different relationship with sexual media. And it's porn performers we must be listening to if we want to revolutionize porn literacy. Porn work is hard work. I don't know if any of you have tried to take a photo of your face and your butt in the same frame. It takes a lot of physical dexterity and emotional fortitude. When governments position pornography as this monolithic billion-dollar industry, they obscure so many of the moving people and parts behind this figure. Much pornography is DIY, made by amateurs in bedrooms. It appeals to people looking for creative, flexible work. Porn performers are fighting for fair pay, to negotiate our contracts in advance, for a range of safer sex options, to have control over the marketing language that's used to describe us. Porn is not just any work. It's precarious. It's stigmatized. It's often criminalized. When my colleague raised an issue about her workplace conditions, it prompted a media frenzy, and police raided her workplace. It's the kind of work that leaves a visual trace, one which can be used to deny us access to employment or social services. Porn stigma can even cost us our lives. Understanding the labor of pornography is essential for audiences, to humanize porn workers, to be invested in our bodily integrity, to truly grasp the concept that sex work is work. Porn is also a media product. There are so many different kinds of pornography, so many different audiences, so many different creators. We can't just say that pornography is this or it does that. Porn has multiple genres, from comedy to romance to horror to documentary. There are feminist pornographies, queer pornographies, ecosexual pornographies. I've even worked with producers who call their approach slow porn, like slow food or slow fashion. By focusing on media, we start to understand these systems of sexual content moderation and curation that shape what kinds of pornography are visible. It's likely that you're not seeing feminist websites because they're buried in search engine results. It's likely that you're not seeing Black-owned businesses or body-positive content because they're suppressed by algorithms that amplify thin white bodies. It's likely that you're not seeing queer sexual practices because they're often illegal to depict, or they're against the terms of service of the platforms or the credit card companies. Audiences should know that what we see online is the result of a media ecosystem dominated by tube sites, many of them built on piracy and monopolization, that make it almost impossible for indie producers to survive. This is essential porn literacy. In my research, I've spoken to so many queer, feminist, sex worker-led platforms who are aspiring to take a different approach to sexual content moderation and curation. More than half those sites have shut down, citing the difficulties of trying to bring their visions to life in a regulatory environment that just does not want them to exist. When I asked what were their breaking points, the catalysts were all too familiar. Constant deplatforming and demonetization, making it impossible to advertise. Repeated financial discrimination, having their funds frozen, not being able to open bank accounts. Onerous regulation that impinged upon their privacy and put them at risk. How can we expect diverse pornographies to proliferate if the systems are actively built to deter them? Pornography is not unregulated. It's regulated badly. Understanding this context is crucial. Governments treat pornography as dangerous, platforms treat it as a risk to brand safety, and both work in tandem to foreclose more radical possibilities of what pornography could be. But what if we stopped treating pornography as a problem and we started treating it as an opportunity? And what if we valued the wealth of knowledge that porn performers bring to the table? A friend of mine, she was known as the porno mum at her daughter's high school, organised a porn literacy panel where porn performers spoke alongside sexologists and psychologists and nurses. And when you put teens in conversation with porn stars, they have really important questions. How does this differ to the kind of sex you have off-screen? How do you navigate your romantic relationships? Were you using lube? These kind of candid conversations do so much to dispel the myths around pornography. Teenagers are having these conversations. Why can't governments? There are so many alternatives for how we relate to pornography. I've watched porn in mainstream cinemas with tiered seating and popcorn. I've attended week-long porn film festivals as a performer, a producer, and a judge, where we screened local, experimental content that wouldn't otherwise be distributed. In these spaces, people come together not to watch porn in isolation, but to talk about it in community, over the panels, over the Q&A, in the queue for the bathrooms. Some of my favorite experiences have been facilitating live adult sex education workshops with fellow porn performers in dance studios, in adult stores, in leather bars, where participants surrounded us, asking us questions about our technique and our body language and our sensations in real time. These kinds of learning experiences could transform how we practice porn literacy. Unfortunately, governments don't tend to invest in porn literacy. They spend most of their time trying to restrict access to pornography, investing in facial recognition technology to guesstimate the ages of porn consumers, or incentivizing platforms to screen our devices or our online posts for sexual content. These kinds of surveillance solutions are unlikely to stop people from finding pornography. But what they do is create significant collateral damage. Porn and nudity filters spend so much of their time and energy trying to detect skin pixels or eggplant emojis or the gender of people's nipples that they routinely censor health promotion, harm reduction, and sex education material. Screening, detection, removal. These have become the hallmarks of public porn policy, rather than equipping people with the skills that they need to understand the content that they will inevitably encounter. So what should we do if we want to create a different relationship to pornography? Well, as a consumer, if you want to broaden your sexual tastes, seek out a variety of content. Your experience will be different if you're browsing a tube site that is run by a multinational conglomerate compared to an independent platform run by a sex worker cooperative. For educators, involve young people and porn performers in your porn literacy campaigns. Young people are often critical media consumers. It's usually adults who are the problem. It's adult fears that prevent young people from accessing information that is relevant to them, like how to have consensual, pleasurable sex, or how to practice kink safely. Sex workers have long been at the forefront of public health initiatives. For decades, we've written about sexual communication and consent. Porn performers are the missing ingredient in porn literacy, and centering us in your program design will lend credibility to your sexual health messaging. As for governments, it's about time politicians stood up and said, let's decriminalize fisting. If we're serious about creating equitable sexual cultures, then we need to create the conditions that permit them to thrive. Decriminalization is just the first step. Break up big tech. End financial discrimination against sex workers. Introduce penalties for the platforms that employ racist, queerphobic, whorephobic algorithms. roll out comprehensive sex education, invest in porn literacy, and pay porn performers to lead it. As for all of us here in the room today, pornography is not something that is outside culture. Even if you don't watch it, we're all still impacted by porn stigma. If you've ever taken a nude and sent it to a lover, you may have considered many of the issues that porn performers do on a commercial scale, like how is that image going to be kept? And what happens if it gets leaked or shared or monetized without your consent? Many of us produce and disseminate explicit media, whether it's through sexting or hookup apps. This means that we need to create ethical, digital, sexual cultures where we teach people to handle intimate imagery with care, with reverence. A decade from now, what do we want our sexual media landscape to look like? I've recently become a new mum. My toddler is here today out the back, creating absolute chaos, no doubt. And one day, they will grow up, and they may find my content on the internet. And I'll be answering more intimate questions. I hope that by the time that happens, we have created a world where porn literacy is embedded in sex education curricula. I hope that we have cultivated a media culture whereby sexual content creators are valued and respected. I hope that we've developed an ethics whereby intimate imagery is not something to be ashamed of or exploited or weaponized. And I hope that we are having genuine conversations about pornography that are led by the people whose bodies are on the line. Thank you so much.